Okay, I'm John Archibald for Reckon. We're here with Walt Maddox, who is announced as candidate for governor. He's the esteemed mayor of Tuscaloosa. Appreciate you coming to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Have a few words. Right off the bat, why, A, why do you want to be governor, and B, why do you think you can be governor?
Well, I want to be governor because I have a 4-year-old and a 15-year-old, and Eli and Taylor, I want them to have a state that if they choose to, they can grow up in. And I'm 45 years old. In my entire life, we have been 46th through 50th in every quality of life measure that matters. We're better than this, and we need leadership that can demonstrate it. Why I think I can be governor? Well, number one, I think I've demonstrated through our leadership in Tuscaloosa what effective government looks like. It's not about R's and D's, it's about results, moving beyond rhetoric. And so I think that platform gives us a reason to believe that we can transfer that to Montgomery and actually talk about effective leadership that wants to move this entire state forward.
Well, what translates from a city to a state? Are you talking about recruiting jobs? You're talking about raising money? You're talking about taxation?
I'm talking about the whole 9 yards, because first of all, the executive branch of government, you've got to make the trains run on time. And our standard of excellence at the city is to be the most innovative and effectively managed city in the United States. We need to apply that same standard to Montgomery, because right now there's not a function of state government that's not in crisis. Mental health, corrections, infrastructure, education, you name the function, it's in crisis. Every day for 12 years at the city of Tuscaloosa, we've been demonstrated what ethical and effective government looks like. I believe that most people don't care whether it's less government or big government. They want effective government. Because that ultimately impacts our quality of life. And so that's the philosophy that we want to bring to truly move Alabama forward. I mean, whether Republican or Democrat, let's face it, in my 45 years and longer, this state has never achieved its potential. It's time we elect leadership that can move beyond the rhetoric and actually focus on day-to-day results.
You know, a lot of times when we talk about that, when we talk about the failure, you know, we have problems with health care, we have problems with education, we have problems with prisons, we have 45th, 50th, like you say, on everything. Oftentimes when we talk about that, people say, you know, you're just hating on Alabama. But what's the difference in pointing out those problems and in fixing them?
Well, let's take healthcare, for example. What we've seen in the last 7 years since 2010 is 7 to 8 rural hospitals have either closed or announced their closure because we didn't expand Medicaid. We didn't expand Medicaid because of the part under the Affordable Care Act that was called Obamacare. That's the reason why we didn't do it. Now, the cost to Alabama has been that 330,000 mostly working Alabamians didn't get the benefit of health care expansion. It's meant that 54 counties in our state now have a hospital that's at risk of closing.
Including one in Kay Abby's hometown.
That's correct. You've also seen other communities have to raise taxes to keep their hospitals open. That was a politically driven decision. It had nothing to do with results. It had everything to do with politics. That's why Alabama deserves better. You even had Mike Pence, now Vice President of the United States, expand Medicaid in Indiana because he understood what it would mean, especially for rural Alabamians. But here in Birmingham, which is the mecca of healthcare for our state, the fact of not expanding Medicaid has cost the state dearly. In fact, I believe it was Dr. Bronner that estimated it was a $1.8 billion economic loss because we failed to do it. And we failed. The only reason why we didn't do it was because it was tied to the Affordable Care Act.
But you got to face that problem too, because I mean it's widely popular to bash Obamacare, and the most Alabama voters, conventional wisdom goes, are opposed to Obamacare. And how do you separate those two things to say, hey, let's expand Medicaid?
It's really simple leadership. I mean, it's leadership. I mean,
Robert Bentley said that too.
Well, but I'm not Robert Bentley. And for 12 years, I've been mayor of Tuscaloosa, and I've made the hard decisions. And what you have to do as a leader is say, by expanding Medicaid, we're going to be able to keep a large number of our rural hospitals open. We're going to make sure that you still have pediatric clinic in your community. We're going to make sure that dentistry is available. Right now in 54 counties across Alabama, your life expectancy is 6 months less than the 13 other counties. So as a leader, I think you should go community by community and explain why expanding Medicaid would be in the best benefit of all Alabamians. Again, you saw Republican governors like Pence do it, Kasich do it. But we didn't have that here in Alabama, and our people deserve better. All of our people deserve better than that.
So it's been a while since we've had any Democratic leadership on a statewide level. First of all, explain tell everybody why you're a Democrat.
Well, I get asked that question a lot, and certainly during the course of my career, and really for the sake of political convenience, I guess it's been easy to declare myself a Republican. But first of all, I think there's a dishonesty in doing that when you're not really a Republican. And Alabama's just had enough dishonesty. I've been a Democrat since I've been 17 years old. I've always felt like government should be fiscally responsible, and we've done that in Tuscaloosa. One of the lowest debt per capita of municipalities in our state, lowest city sales tax. We get less than 3% on our city sales tax compared to places like Birmingham, who get 4.5 cents, or Mobile that gets 5. So we do more with less. But I also believe there is a role for government to play in your community, whether it's expanding pre-K, expanding Medicaid, as we talked about, for health care, ensuring that we have good roads and infrastructure, job development and growth. We've seen it in the revitalization of downtown Tuscaloosa. The city and the federal government, and state and federal government, we've invested $100 million. We've seen over $300 million in private investment. We believe there is a role to play. I've had to, as mayor, you'll look down to Montgomery and you see the politicians talk about, we cut government. And that sounds really good. You win the press conference and you make a lot of people feel good. But here's what happens. When you do that, mental health services have become depleted in our state. So many of our homeless in our communities throughout Alabama are former clients or are clients of the Alabama Department of Mental Health. We've seen hospital closures. 20% of our bridges in this state are functionally obsolete. So while they're down there patting themselves on the back, they're actually providing a disservice to the people of Alabama, because they're hoping and praying that local governments like Birmingham and Tuscaloosa and the 400 other in our state will raise taxes themselves and take over those services so they can remain popular back in their districts. And we've never had a governor call them on the carpet for it. That's what we plan on doing.
So the legislature starts Monday, and you're talking essentially about politicians going down there and pandering to constituents in order to get elected, rather than to do the things that they need to do to actually lead.
Absolutely.
Is it as widespread to you as it seems to me?
It is as widespread, and the problem is that you have too many legislators who believe in their reelection more than they believe in the duty that they've been sworn oath to do. Now, I'll say this. I do think that we can create the coalition of the willing to actually move the state forward. There are a lot of good men and women in our legislature who see the same problems that I've talked about today, but they need executive leadership. You ultimately, from the governor's office, the greatest authority you have is moral authority. And the leader of this state needs to provide the moral authority, the direction that we need to move Alabama forward. And until you have that, it's going to be very difficult to break the culture that currently exists in Montgomery.
Of course, so what, 3 out of the last 5 governors have been booted out of office for ethical or other violations. What can you say to people? How can you assure people that you're not going to be just another one on that list?
Well, I have 12 years I've been elected 4 times as mayor of Tuscaloosa, not one ethical challenge during my 12 years. I've tried to do things every day the right way. I've tried to live by what St. Francis of Assisi said, every day preach the Gospels, and if necessary, use words.
And there's not anything lurking there that we need to know about?
Not anything lurking that I know about.
Well, that's good to know. We'll keep looking.
I have no doubt.
So if Alabama and UAB played in a bowl game, who would you be for?
UAB.
If the University of Alabama were not in Tuscaloosa, how would your mayorship compare? How would the city compare now to then?
Oh, there's no doubt. The University of Alabama has transformed Tuscaloosa. It's I think a $1.7, $1.8 billion economic impact. It is, us being in the national championship game, I mean, think about what that means for our city. It's amazing.
So with Doug Jones having just beaten Roy Moore,
mm-hmm.
What does that do to your chances of becoming governor?
I think it does nothing but help. We felt like from the very beginning there was a pathway to victory. Doug Jones' election just affirmed that in ways that you can talk about it, but to demonstrate it and show it, it changed everything for us overnight. I mean, the fundraising, the volunteers, everything about our campaign has changed since December 12th.
Is that a mechanism that stays, that sort of exists now that didn't exist last year?
Doug, by essentially winning this election and having the influx of resources come into his campaign, has created a new Democratic Party. And those resources are there. And what we have to do as a campaign is make sure that we utilize that apparatus that's left over from his campaign.
So do you go to bed every night praying that Roy Moore gets the Republican nomination for governor?
You know what? I have to focus on us. I mean, you know, to borrow, you know, being in Tuscaloosa, you can't help but borrow from Coach Saban, is that you've got to focus inward. You can't worry about what happens in the other party, because you'll drive yourself crazy trying to manipulate a scenario that's going to work for you. How many people in the Clinton campaign thought, boy, we sure hope Donald Trump is the nominee on the other side? I'm sure a lot did. I can't control any of that. What I can control is what I do and what our campaign team does every single day.
So it's a process.
It's a process.
Are you the offensive coordinator who gets to yell at when things don't go right?
I guess.
You know, we appreciate you coming in and talking a bit, and hope to see you down the road.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.